This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome. You've heard and read the spin the media and the politicians have put on the issues of the day. To get the correct spin on what's going on in North Carolina, let's introduce you to our panel of experts.
This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome. You've heard and read the spin the media and the politicians have put on the issues of the day. To get the correct spin on what's going on in North Carolina, let's introduce you to our panel of experts. They include political consultant Brad Crone, NC Policy Watch's Chris Fitzsimon, Syndicated columnist and soon-to-be-released new author John Hood, and Phil Kirk, who's former state chairman of the Board of Education, former state senator, on and on and on and on. Well, this week we're going to give you the most comprehensive and complete analysis of the new state budget you'll find anywhere. Plus, we'll ask the panel to tell us something we don't know, so let's get started. Well, you had to know it was going to come down to the deadline before our lawmakers would agree on the budget, but as long as it took them to reach an agreement, they approved the budget lickety-split, as the old folks used to say. I want to ask all the candidates if there were any big surprises that they found in this budget. Phil Kirk, I'll start with you.
Well, you took me back when you called us candidates. I'm not sure what we're running for. What am I running? What are we running for?
The Republican national nomination. Everybody else is.
Oh, okay. Well, now what was the question? Oh, what's surprise? This may surprise you that I found this surprising, but I was pleasantly surprised to see the new money for reading instruction, reading summer camps for first and second graders. Originally it started out as reading camps for third graders, and one of my grandchildren participated in it, and it helped her a lot. And I won't get into my pro-reading speech, but if students can't read by third grade, they're destined to failure. So things like that are not going to get much coverage, but I'm proud of them for that.
Berger said the first three grades they learned to read. From that point on, they read to learn.
I wish I'd said that.
Well, it was good. It was a good quote. I tried to remember it. John, any surprises with you?
Well, I was very pleasantly surprised at what I think is the single biggest decision in the budget, which was not to spend money. They put $450 million into the rainy day fund, the largest single deposit, I believe, ever. They put $150 million into repair and renovation. They put they preserved and added to make a Medicaid reserve of a couple $100 million and then some. And they did some additional savings, and they left almost $200 million of unspent money in the general fund account. My point is, there's a strong constituency to spend money. There's a strong constituency to cut taxes. One of the biggest decisions they made was to say no to both of those options and to put a great deal of money into savings and repairs and renovations. That was an excellent decision. It was something that the House and the Senate both had telegraphed, but the Senate had been stronger about. And the final outcome came close to the Senate position.
Chris, any surprises?
I don't think any shocking surprises. I think the surprise will be if we still don't discover secret things that they put in the budget 2 weeks and 3 weeks and 4 weeks because of the way the budget was put together. I was a little surprised that the tax cuts will amount to $400 million, I think, over 2 years beyond the corporate tax reduction. That's going to be a little bit of a hard sell when you tell veteran teachers and state employees you're getting $750 one-time bonus, which is $60 a month before taxes. So it's hard to tell them there's not much money when you're cutting taxes on wealthy folks and corporations.
Brad, surprises?
Tom, I've been following state government and state politics since really 1976 when Jim Hunt was elected governor. And you've heard governors and you've heard legislators talk about stopping the transfer of the Highway Trust Fund money into the general fund. And it's been going on for a long period of time. They actually did it this year. And it's going to have a huge impact on the highway budget in the short term, simply because it's going to free up money to go into the smaller projects into the suburban and rural counties. And I think it's going to have just a huge impact.
Could I add some? I absolutely agree that was surprising that finally happened. And Brad is absolutely right. That has been debated. Now, it's the highway fund, not the trust fund. Because the trust fund was already taken. This is money for the highway patrol primarily. That was originally proposed by Governor Hunt in his first term. And it only now happened. And pretty much every governor has at one point or the other proposed it, and various legislators proposed it, but it never happened until this year.
And finally gave up on it. Yeah. Phil, let's begin with public education. There are a lot of issues there to discuss, but the big sticking point seemed to be over teacher assistants. Now, at the end of the day, the lawmakers decided to keep TAs, but put in a stipulation that the money that the local school systems were going to get could only be used to hire teacher assistants. What's your viewpoint on that
Well,
decision?
with all the complaining about doing away with a lot of teacher assistants, I think when they appropriated, I think they made the right decision. Today's teacher assistants are not the teacher assistants of the old days when they were primarily clerks. So I've been in a lot of classrooms, as you know, and the teacher assistants are very much needed. And so I was glad that happened. And I think the legislature, I don't usually agree with micromanaging, but I think I was surprised when it came out a few months ago that a number of school systems who were complaining about not having money for teacher assistants had taken some money and had used it for other things. So I think the legislature did the right thing.
Brad, another issue in education was drivers training, drivers education. They let the funding run out. The studies have shown that there's value to giving the kids education, giving them time behind the wheel, but they've also shown this program could be better supervised and it could be improved. Why was it actually decided to eliminate driver's ed altogether and then put it back in the budget?
Well, I think it was a process of negotiations with the House. I think the Senate truly does believe that they can improve the program. You can look at privatization. There are privatization efforts out there. They've been rather successful. And I think that it will be a policy debate, Tom, coming down the road that you're going to have more discussion on. They did it because the school systems needed to have clarity right now. I think you'll see this issue in the future clearly on the books again for another legislature.
John, help us understand the decision of the state to allow the State Board of Education to consolidate adjacent school districts when the systems didn't ask to be consolidated. Traditionally, it's been done, but only after the various districts asked to be consolidated. And
sometimes after a referendum.
Is this really just about Halifax County?
I think that's probably right. There are still a number of city systems left. There happen to be two in that county. Look, I don't think that the mergers have saved money as was claimed, but lots of people at the General Assembly think they do. Interestingly, it used to be not really an ideological split. You'd have some more conservative lawmakers opposed to these mergers, and you had the late Representative and Senator Martin Nesbitt arguing that Asheville City and Buncombe County ought to maintain their two separate systems. I think this particular provision might be aimed at Halifax, which is kind of an easy target because they're having so much trouble. But I fear that we're going to attempt to force additional school district mergers that don't make any sense.
Chris, the voucher system, they expanded the voucher system. Now, originally this started out for low-income students, low-income families. Are we now to understand that it is going to be broadened to include more than low income?
Well, it depends on your definition of low income. It'll be broadened. It was broadened. It'll be broadened again, and there's a significant increase in funding. I'm surprised that we would do this before we have any results about how it's working. There's really no accountability in this program, and we're expanding it. I do want to say quickly, it's interesting, we go around the table and we're talking about a budget that basically left some of these things the same, and they're claiming credit for not cutting TAs, for not cutting driver's education. I'm not sure that's an advance for North Carolina to not cut anymore.
Yeah, well, my column this week is what took them so long not to make all these decisions. Well, we welcome our new viewers in the Greenville, Washington, Newbern market on Fox Eastern Carolina, and we thank you for watching NC Spin over the air or on YouTube. Here's a reminder, there's much more on our website, ncspin.com, or NC Spin on Facebook. You'll find video footage not seen anywhere else, perspective pieces from our panelists, and our weekly column. Get more balanced debate from the Old North State on ncspin.com, NCSpin on Facebook, or on Twitter at NCSpinTweets. More budget analysis after these messages.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
Phones are getting smarter, cars more efficient, TVs bigger and more stunning. Imagine the same innovation from agriculture. Meet the Plant Sciences Initiative at NC State, a proposed state-of-the-art research complex where world-class researchers will tackle agriculture's toughest challenges, like feeding the world's rapidly growing population while preserving natural resources for future generations. Join Farm Bureau and NC State in moving North Carolina to the forefront of ag research in the world. Visit keepaggrowing.org.
The cost of everything has gone up dramatically over the last 75 years. With one exception, keeping electricity affordable. That's the power of your co-op membership. Learn more at togetherwesave.com.
North Carolina's Touchstone Energy Cooperatives, looking out for you.
Hey everyone, I'm Linda Loveland. If feeding your family safe, affordable foods is a priority for you, then join me in saying thanks to the North Carolina farmers who feed us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's say thanks to the farmers who feed your family at #ThankNCFarmers. To learn more about the foods we eat and the farm families who feed us, visit feedthedialoguenc.com. And be sure to thank North Carolina farmers.
We now return to NC Spin.
We continue our analysis of the budget that was just passed this past year. After all the noise that was raised about giving the film companies incentives to film in the state, they were allowed to expire. The legislature seemed to cave under this pressure to restore them, and they did, and gave them $30 million for the fund. How are they going to justify this when they're trying to close all the loopholes, Brad?
Well, Tom, it may be too little too late for the film industry. I know that proponents for the film tax credit were looking at a figure closer to 100 to 150 million. So they were somewhat upset and perhaps insulted.
But 30 is better than zero.
Absolutely. $30 million is better than zero, and it's a good starting point. The question is, will they be able to recover? And that's going to be a big question mark for Eastern North Carolina.
Phil, another big question involved the historic preservation tax credit. The governor went all over the state. Was up in your former Trump.
Well, I give the Secretary of Cultural Resources, Susan Klutz from Salisbury, maybe even more credit than the governor. She made 75 speeches, I think, all over the state. I think they made the right decision. I know it flies in the face of loopholes and exemptions and all that. And I would disagree with your word about caving on the film credit. I think they came to their senses. We're losing a big industry. In the spirit of disclosure, my daughter works in that office of sports and film and tourism in state government, so I've heard a little bit about
Chris,
it.
they let the much debated and much argued and much lobbied issue of renewable energy credits, they let all of that expire. Mm-hmm. Were you surprised?
I wasn't surprised given the vigorous lobbying by folks. There was an interest group that actually held a quasi-legislative meeting to talk about their point of view a couple of days before the decision was made. So a little surprised because Speaker Moore actually held on to that, defeated an effort in the House to repeal it, and then lost in the negotiations with the Senate. It's interesting to point out the historic tax credit was reduced. They didn't leave it at the same amount.
John, they retained funding for the North Carolina Biotechnology Center, but they eliminated the funding for the Hunt Institute over in Chapel Hill. What are we to make of these decisions?
That it was wise not to rename the Biotech Center after Mike Easley or Bev Perdue. They might have had a similar outcome. I think that I think there is a strong lobby, and I don't agree with it. I don't agree with much of this. I think they shouldn't have done any of this corporate welfare garbage, but they do it. But in this particular case, the Biotechnology Center has long history, long roots, and has very specific programs people understand. I'm a little familiar with the Hunt Institute and what they do. Some of it involves training, some of it involves convening conversations. It was just a harder thing to defend and did look like a political plump.
But they did follow, Brad, they did follow the governor's recommendations to move the North Carolina Zoo, the aquariums, the state parks, Museum of Natural Science out of Diener and move it into Cultural Resources and rename the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources, while Diener is going to lose their part of their name, and they're going to become the Department of Environmental Quality. What do you think of this?
Well, I think that it's a good move, and from a management structure, I think it will help clarify departmental goals, and I think it's a good positive move for the governor. And it's, I think the first really major change in your cabinet structure in the last 20 years.
Well, I was going to say, Phil, when you were chief of staff for Governor Martin, there was all kinds of talk about reorg and reorganizing government and so forth like that. Now we got 2 new cabinet level positions that are going to be created, one for information technology and one for veteran affairs. What do you think of that?
Well, it seemed when I first looked at it that was sort of anti-Republican philosophy of creating new departments. But I think particularly in IT, it should be more efficient. That's been a real mess, in my opinion, in state government for at least 20 years. So giving one person authority and cabinet secretary, and it's also hard to be against helping veterans. And so I think politically they needed to do that too.
John, we've talked many times on this show about the sale of Dorothea Dix Park, or the Dix Park and the land. And when the governor made the announcement, he said that the $50 million we got for the Dix property, the 300 acres of land that we sold, was going to go toward mental health. Now we find out in this budget that $49.9 million of that money is going to go into a special slush fund that the legislature only can decide how to use. How's this going to play?
Well, it sounds contrary to our mental health. I think
sounds contrary.
I'm not sure exactly what that money's going to end up being spent on, but if they do not end up spending it as originally promised, or something similar to what was originally promised, I think that will be a significant political problem.
Yeah. All right. After these messages, we're going to come back with more analysis of the budget the legislature passed.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
It's a fact. Patients who receive care in the medical home from a trusted family physician reduce healthcare costs through prevention, early detection, and affordable management of high-cost chronic diseases.
Every dollar invested in healthcare matters. Let's invest them wisely, building on North Carolina's medical home model. Better health begins with a medical home, a trusted family physician, the best return on our healthcare investment. Learn about the importance of medical homes at ournchealthcare.com.
Opportunity moves at the speed of broadband, but is rural NC stalled at dial-up? Join the conversation. Attend the NC Rural Assembly on September 29th, a discussion on broadband connectivity and rural NC opportunities. Register now at ncruralcenter.org.
You sleep on concrete till your body get immune to concrete.
My mom got my brother and I up and said, "Come on, we're leaving."
I became homeless in the beginning of this year.
When I was about 4 or 5 years old, our house caught fire.
I used to see my brother. If he see me, he'd turn and go the other direction.
We did the only thing that we could think of, and we went to a Salvation Army shelter.
We don't have this, what's your background look like? We just say, what do you need?
I remember the man from the Salvation Army coming down with a box of clothes.
The Salvation Army officer bought my brother and I an ice cream cone.
Last week, my brother walked up to me, and he just started a conversation.
Today I've given my life to the Salvation Army because I remember what somebody did for me, my brother, and my mom over 30 years ago.
The Salvation Army for me means hope.
Compassion.
Family.
Support.
We now return to NC Spin.
I want to cover as many other issues as we can. Brad Crone, the question of Medicaid reform had lingered around for a lot of years, and while the details still are not contained in the budget, it does allow for $225 million of planning money to make the transition for pay-for-service over to managed care. There was talk about moving the Department of Medicaid out of the Department of Health and Human Services. Instead, they decided to create a new division within DHHS. What do you make of all this?
Well, Tom, we've been talking about this for a very long period of time. Intensive talks for the last 3 years, 4 years. All in all, it's not a bad deal. The legislature, House and Senate were able to bring together your docs, your hospitals, the CCNC folks, and your managed care folks. It's a bifurcated system. You're going to have a 36 to 48-month transition period, and you're going to have a new emphasis on management. Big question on the budget is what structure and what role will this new entity within the Department of Health and Human Services play,
and how they're going to interrelate with the existing.
How they will interrelate, and I reckon the devil's in the details. That'll have to be worked out in the next 3 years.
John, we had talked a lot about certificate of need on NC Spend. We were led to believe this was a done deal. They were going to have certificate of need, and then when the budget comes out, it's not in there. What happened?
Well, remember that the certificate of need debate, though it doesn't have to be thought about this way, is largely about hospitals trying to maintain their current revenue flow. They simply don't want the competition. And their argument is that they've got charity care and so forth they have to take care of, which, by the way, the state budget went after, but saying, okay, publish how much charity care.
Exactly.
Now, let's actually figure this out.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, the hospitals had multiple things potentially against them. At one point, there was still discussion about limiting their sales tax exemption. They had the managed care Medicaid debate going on. They had CON. Ultimately, they ended up moving forward on the Medicaid, which is the largest single item, and I guess they figured out the hospitals weren't going to lose on three things. They were only going to lose on one.
Well, hospitals came out pretty good in this agreement from what I was able to see.
They might have preferred something a little bit more friendly to their position.
Well, lawmakers put a special provision in that agencies that perform abortions cannot receive funding for family planning. Chris from DHHS, this seems to be aimed specifically and targeted to Planned Parenthood. Is that your take?
Absolutely. I don't think there's any question about that. This is an effort that they've been going after Planned Parenthood for years, and given the national climate, I'm not surprised. I do think it's important on the CON thing to say this should have never been in the budget. There's a lot of things we've talked about. These policy items should be up or down and have a committee vote and testimony and everything else. So I'm glad it wasn't passed regardless of the merits, because that's one of the policy issues that should have never been there in the first place.
All right. Phil, Governor McCrory got his wish for a $2 billion bond referendum for public infrastructure that's going to be put on the ballot either in March or November, but not until the legislature spends some time deciding to approve the projects on this. Should Governor McCrory be worried?
Yes. Some legislative input it could be helpful in terms of passing it, but I hope they won't make too many changes in it.
I mean, is it just going to politicize it?
It went through as much of a non-political process as possible to come up with the bond package. They didn't promise every university something, as an example. So I think it's great it's going to be on the ballot, but if the expression "the devil's in the details" is really appropriate on this one.
The Republicans have an opportunity on the political front to really score big points if they put the bond referendum in a March referendum, in the March primary. And the reason why, you pass the referendum in March, you enroll the bonds in late May, you sell the bonds the first week of July, and Tom, you know, if you put $500 million of contracts out in the general construction market,
14,000 jobs.
You're going to have a whole lot of jobs.
Yeah. All right, corporations and individuals got tax cuts in this, but sales taxes on many of the services were added. John, some people are calling this a sales tax shift, actually. It's expected to raise more than $400 million, but the lawmakers say the average taxpayer is still going to see a tax reduction. Are you buying that?
The sales tax is not raised $400 million. You mean the net tax cut?
Next tax, yeah.
Okay, so first of all, the change in the budget actually made the corporate tax cut that was previously scheduled a little less likely. People didn't quite follow the math on this. And they
you
thought
wrote
it was
a column
good.
on that.
It did do single sales, but the much larger potential effect is to delay the corporate tax cut by a year. The main thing is the quarter percent reduction in the personal income tax rate. There are some households, not very many, but there are some households, poor households that have no income tax liability, for whom the sales tax expansion is just a tax increase.
All right. More discussion on this budget after these messages.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
Hey everyone, I'm Linda Loveland. If feeding your family safe, affordable foods is a priority for you, then join me in saying thanks to the North Carolina farmers who feed us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's say thanks to the farmers who feed your family at hashtag ThankNCFarmers. To learn more about the foods we eat and the farm families who feed us, visit feedthedialoguenc.com. And be sure to thank North Carolina farmers.
Clean transportation options can help you fuel what matters.
We're fueling what matters to us by converting our fleet of collection trucks over to compressed natural gas. It's a good, smart business decision, and having the air cleaner is something that benefits all the families that work with us.
We use biodiesel in our heavy equipment. We've got propane in a lot of our police cars, and we've really embraced the electric car. Join the city of Raleigh and fuel what matters.
To learn how you can fuel what matters, visit fuelwhatmatters.org.
Phones are getting smarter, cars more efficient, TVs bigger and more stunning. Imagine the same innovation from agriculture. Meet the Plant Sciences Initiative at NC State, a proposed state-of-the-art research complex where world-class researchers will tackle agriculture's toughest challenges, like feeding the world's rapidly growing population while preserving natural resources for future generations. Join Farm Bureau and NC State in moving North Carolina to the forefront of ag research in the world. Visit keepaggrowing.org.
We now return to NC Spin.
Well, so much more we could be talking about on this budget, and believe me, we will pick it up again next week. But got a lot of letters last week that we didn't do the Tell Us Something We Don't Know segments. So make sure we want to get that in this year. Chris Fitzsimon, tell us something we don't know.
Well, I thought one of the most interesting parts of the budget debate was the Democrats complaining, I thought rightfully, about not having, in the Senate, not having time to read the budget before they voted on it, not knowing what was in it. Senator Berger said all these provisions, they've been out there, they've all been discussed. The day after the budget passed second reading, there was a story that there was a provision which will squash a light rail line from Durham to Chapel Hill that nobody had seen and nobody knew where it came from. Now, whatever you think of light rail, I thought it was ironic that Senator Berger was defending the fact that all these provisions have been out there. A new secret was discovered overnight to show that he was not telling the truth.
And we still hadn't uncovered everything there is in that budget. All right, Brad Crone, tell us something we don't know.
Well, Tom, law enforcement agencies across the state are really scratching their head with the kickoff of the NFL season last week. Two major advertising on NFL were fantasy football organizations, FanDuel and DraftKings. And a lot of them are saying that you can play for free, but if you pay, you're basically breaking the video gaming law of 2010 in the state of North Carolina. So a lot of people are going to the district attorneys. How are they getting away with that? The district attorneys are going to have to go to the attorney general and ask for an opinion and see if they can't regulate video gaming again in North Carolina. But that's a national spot, isn't it? It's a national spot. It's a national organization, and they're making millions of dollars right here out of the state of North Carolina.
Well, obviously are. Phil Kirk, tell us something we don't know.
In education and political circles, there's been widespread speculation that June Atkinson would not run for re-election as state superintendent because she's raised little or no money. I understand now she's under pressure from Democrats and some Republicans who work well with her to go ahead and make a decision. I think she's honestly undecided at this point.
Interesting, because that has been speculated. Cash Michaels made that announcement on NC Spin on this segment, what, about a year ago?
That she wouldn't run?
That she wasn't going to run.
Well, she told me last time she wasn't. This time she hadn't told me.
Well, is that a good sign or a bad sign? John, tell us something we don't know.
I have another state ranking story for you. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce surveyed a bunch of lawyers around the country, tens of thousands, I think. North Carolina ranks 7th in the nation and 1st in the South in its civil liability system, according to corporate defense attorneys. In other words, North Carolina's tort system, its legal system, has become much friendlier to business, and this means that the halls of justice or the advocates of justice or whatever they talk about, whatever they call themselves now, are unhappy for good reason.
Wow.
Because I guess the Legion of Doom is, doing better than the Hall of Justice.
Maybe
that's a little superhero cartoon joke for you.
Yeah, maybe there's some synergy here. They could get into video gaming or something. Who knows? Well, you've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed all during the week, give your feedback and read our weekly column. Be sure to visit our website, ncspin.com, or catch NC Spin on Facebook. And we hope you'll join us next week when we'll have more balanced debate for the Old North State. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
Join us next week and get the spin on issues facing our state.